The lawyer's voice cracked when he told me the condition. "Miss Aldridge, your grandmother's will is clear. You inherit the Litchfield house, all of it, but you must spend 72 hours inside before you can sell. Alone. No exceptions." I asked why. He looked at the papers like they might catch fire. She didn't explain. She made me promise to tell you that the clock stopped on March 14th in 1952, and that you'd understand why once you went inside. I didn't understand. I'd never even met my grandmother. My mother had forbidden any contact with her side of the family my entire life, and when I pressed her about it as a teenager, she'd gone pale and said, "Some silences protect you, Claire. Don't break them." But my mother had been dead for 3 years now. The silence was already broken. The house stood at the end of Prospect Street in Litchfield and Connecticut, a 3-story federal-style home with black shutters and a widow's walk that looked out over absolutely nothing. Every clock inside had stopped at 3:47, except one. My grandmother, Vera Aldridge, had died at 91 without ever reaching out to me. Not a birthday card, not a phone call, nothing. The inheritance came as a shock, not because of the money, but because I didn't know she'd remembered me at all. Litchfield is one of those Connecticut towns that looks like it was designed by someone who'd read too many New England postcards. White churches, colonial houses, quiet streets where nothing ever seems to happen. The kind of place people move to when they want their children to grow up safely. My grandmother's house sat on the corner of Prospect and West, a pale yellow Federal with symmetrical windows and a front door painted deep blue. It had been built in 1847, according to the historical marker someone had nailed to the fence, and it looked like it hadn't been updated since. I'd driven up from Boston on a Friday afternoon in October, the trees just starting to turn. The lawyer had given me a key, a heavy iron thing that looked older than the lock it supposedly fit, and wished me luck in a way that felt more like a warning. The house watched me pull into the gravel driveway. I know how that sounds, but standing there with my overnight bag and my phone, staring up at those black shuttered windows, I felt it. Not malice exactly, just attention. The kind you feel when someone's been waiting for you and you're late. Before we continue, subscribe if you want to keep hearing stories like this. Stories these houses were never meant to tell. The key turned in the lock like it had been oiled yesterday. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not decay, not dust, though there was plenty of both. It was something older, like dried flowers and old paper, and something faintly metallic I couldn't place. The air itself felt thick, almost textured, like I was breathing in years. The front hall was narrow, with a staircase that climbed straight up the center of the house. To my left, a parlor. To my right, what looked like a dining room. The floors were wide pine boards, dark with age and worn smooth in paths that showed where people had walked for over a century. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust except the floor. The floor was clean, not recently cleaned. There were no vacuum marks, no smell of chemicals, just clean. Like someone had been walking these paths right up until the moment I arrived. I set my bag down and walked into the parlor. That's when I saw the clocks. There were 7 of them in that room alone. A grandfather clock in the corner, silent and still. 2 ornate mantel clocks on either end of the fireplace. A carriage clock on the side table. 3 wall clocks of varying sizes and styles. Every single one had stopped at 3:47. The hands weren't stuck. They weren't broken. They were simply stopped, frozen at that exact moment, like someone had held the world still and walked away. I moved through the house, room by room. The dining room, 4 more clocks, all stopped at 3:47. The kitchen, 2 clocks, same time. The library, 6 clocks. The sitting room, 3. By the time I'd made it through the first floor, I'd counted 29 clocks, all frozen at the same impossible moment. My phone buzzed. A text from my friend Jessica. "How's the creepy inheritance going?" I started to type a reply about the clocks, then stopped. It would sound insane. I sent back, "Weird but fine. Call you tomorrow." The phone showed 6:23 p.m. I had 71 hours and 37 minutes left. I went back to the front hall for my bag and noticed something I'd missed before. On the wall beside the stairs, there was a framed photograph. A woman in her 30s, standing in front of this very house. She was beautiful in that severe, controlled way people were in old photographs. Dark hair pulled back, a dress with a high collar, eyes staring directly at the camera with an expression I couldn't read. Below the photograph, a small brass plaque. Vera Aldridge, March 1952. March 1952. The same month and year the lawyer had mentioned. I stared at my grandmother's face, looking for some echo of my own features. My mother had always told me I looked like my father's side, but standing there, I could see it, the shape of the jaw, the set of the eyes. That's when I heard it, ticking, faint, but clear, coming from somewhere above me. I looked up at the ceiling, following the sound. It was rhythmic, steady, the unmistakable sound of a working clock, but it was coming from the 3rd floor. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed. The 2nd floor was more bedrooms, more stopped clocks. I counted 11 more as I passed, but I didn't stop. The ticking pulled me upward like a thread I couldn't let go. The 3rd floor landing was smaller, with only 2 doors. One stood open, revealing a sparse bedroom with a single bed and a window that looked out over the street. The other door was closed. The ticking came from behind it. I tried the handle. Locked. I went back downstairs, searching for keys. In the kitchen, I found a drawer full of them. Dozens of old brass and iron keys on loops of string and wire. I grabbed the whole collection and went back up. It took 11 tries before one of the keys fit. The lock turned with a sound like something exhaling. The attic was low-ceilinged and hot, despite the October chill outside. Boxes lined the walls, old furniture covered in sheets, trunks with brass fittings that had long since tarnished to green. And in the center of the room, on a small table, a single clock. It was a beautiful piece. Dark wood case, brass fittings, Roman numerals on a white enamel face, the kind of clock that belonged in a study or a lawyer's office. The hands showed 6:41 p.m. The correct time? I stood there, listening to it tick, and felt something shift in the house around me. Not a sound, not a movement, just a sense of attention redirecting, focusing, tightening, like I'd found something I wasn't supposed to find, or like I'd found exactly what I was meant to find. I reached out to touch the clock, and the attic door slammed shut behind me. My heart stopped. I spun around, but the door was just a door. No wind, no draft, nothing that would explain it closing on its own. I crossed to it and tried the handle. Locked, from the outside. The key I'd used was still in my pocket. I could feel it, but the door wouldn't budge. I pulled. I rattled it. I threw my shoulder against it. Nothing. Calm down, I told myself. Old houses settle. Doors stick. This is just... The ticking stopped. I turned back to the clock on the table. The hand still showed 6:41, but the second hand was frozen mid-swing, not stuck on a number, frozen in the space between seconds, like it had stopped mid-breath, and in the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps. Below me, on the 2nd floor. Slow, deliberate footsteps walking down the hallway toward the stairs. I pressed my ear to the attic door and listened. The footsteps had stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing but my own breathing and the hammering of my heart. Then, from somewhere below, I heard a door close. Not slam, close. The soft, certain click of a latch catching. Old houses make noise. I knew this. Floorboards settle. Temperature changes make wood expand and contract. Wind gets in through cracks and moves things around. My mother had always been sensitive to sounds. When I was a kid and we lived in that old triple-decker in Somerville, she'd wake up at every creak and groan, convinced someone was breaking in. "Old houses remember how to scare you," she'd said once. "They've had a lot of practice." This was that. Just an old house doing what old houses do. I tried the door again. Still locked. My phone showed 6:44 p.m. and full signal. I could call someone. The police? A locksmith? Jessica? But what would I say? That I'd locked myself in an attic and heard footsteps in an empty house. I pulled up the flashlight app and started searching the attic properly. The boxes were mostly papers. Old bills, receipts, letters in handwriting so faded I could barely read them. One trunk held clothes from what looked like the 1940s, carefully folded and smelling of camphor. Another had children's toys, a wooden horse, a porcelain doll with glass eyes, a set of blocks with letters carved into them. Had my grandmother had other children? My mother had never mentioned siblings. I found photo albums, dozens of them, arranged chronologically on a shelf I hadn't noticed at first. I pulled down the one labeled 1945-1955 and opened it. My grandmother's life, documented in black and white. There she was in 1945, younger than the photo downstairs, standing with a man in a military uniform. Her husband, I assumed, My grandfather, whoever he'd been. 1946. The two of them in front of the house, his arm around her waist. 1947. My grandmother pregnant, sitting in the parlor I'd walked through earlier. 1948. A baby, a little girl in a christening gown. 1949. The little girl, older now, standing in the front yard. 1950. My grandmother alone. No husband in the photos anymore. Just her and the child. 1951. The girl, maybe 3 or 4 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with a birthday cake. 1952. Nothing. The pages for 1952 were empty. Not missing. There were no torn edges or gaps. Just empty black pages with the corners of mounting tabs still visible, like photos had been there and been carefully removed. The album ended in 1955. The last photo showed my grandmother standing in front of the house, alone, looking directly at the camera with an expression I recognize now, grief. I put the album back and kept searching. Behind a covered armchair, I found a wooden box about the size of a shoebox. It wasn't locked. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Vera Aldridge at the Prospect Street address, all postmarked from various Connecticut towns in the 1950s and 60s. I opened one at random. Dear Mrs. Aldridge, I wanted to write and thank you for what you did for my family. When my daughter disappeared last spring, the police told us to accept that she was gone, but you told us to check the house on Maple Street, the one her father inherited from his uncle. We found her there, exactly where you said she'd be, in the attic, curled up like she'd been sleeping. The doctors say she was in some kind of fugue state, but she's home now and recovering. I don't know how you knew, but I'll never forget it. God bless you. Sarah Henderson. Another letter. Vera. My brothers will specified that I must stay in the old family house for a week before inheriting. I thought it was madness, but you explained why. You were right about what was waiting there. I did what you told me to do. I spoke to it. I listened. I didn't run. It let me go on the 7th day. The house sold last month. I'm free now. Thank you for understanding what no one else could. Thomas Webb. I read through a dozen more. They were all similar. People thanking my grandmother for helping them with houses, with inheritances, with family properties that remembered things. She'd been some kind of, a consultant, a psychic, someone people came to when their inherited houses wouldn't let them go. The attic door rattled. I jumped, dropping the box of letters. The door rattled again, harder this time, like someone was testing the lock from the other side. Hello? My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. The rattling stopped. I walked to the door and pressed my palm against it. The wood was warm. Old houses didn't stay warm like this. Not in October. Not in an unheated attic. Is someone there? Nothing. I tried the handle again. This time, it turned. The door swung open onto the 3rd floor landing, exactly as I'd left it. Empty. Silent. The bedroom door across the hall was still open. The stairs leading down were clear. I stepped out of the attic, pulling my phone from my pocket to check the time. 6:47 p.m. I'd been in the attic for exactly 3 minutes. That couldn't be right. I'd read through a dozen letters, searched through boxes, found the photo albums. That was at least 30 minutes of work. But my phone insisted. 6:47. I looked back at the clock on the table in the attic. Its hands had moved. They showed 6:47 as well, and the second hand was ticking again, steady and sure. I walked back to it slowly. The clock was a German-made piece, according to the brass plate on the bottom, made in 1889, a working mechanism that had been ticking for over 130 years. Why this clock? Why was this the only one in the entire house that hadn't stopped on March 14th or 1952? I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, the weight of the mechanism inside giving it a solid, certain feel. On the back, scratched into the wood in letters so small I almost missed them. Time kept is time owed. I set it back down. The house had gone very still around me. No settling, no creaking, no wind against the windows. Just silence, deep and waiting. I understood then what I was supposed to think. My grandmother had been eccentric. She'd collected clocks, gotten obsessed with some tragedy in 1952, and built a mythology around it. The stopped clocks were a memorial, maybe, or a symptom of grief-induced delusion. The letters were from people she'd helped, or thought she'd helped, with their own superstitions about inherited properties. The door closing, the footsteps, the lost time, all of it could be explained by stress, by exhaustion, by the power of suggestion in a strange house. I was scaring myself over nothing. The house was just a house. I went downstairs to make dinner. The kitchen had been updated sometime in the 1970s. Avocado green appliances, linoleum floor, cabinets with brass handles that had never been replaced. But it was clean and functional, and the refrigerator the lawyer had arranged to be stocked was humming quietly in the corner. I made pasta with jarred sauce and ate it standing at the counter, scrolling through my phone. Jessica had texted again. "Seriously though, are you okay? That place looks creepy as hell on Google Maps." I replied, "It's fine, just old. I'll call you in the morning." The windows over the sink looked out onto the backyard, an overgrown lawn that ended at a stone wall, beyond which I could see the skeletal frames of trees. It was full dark now, and the glass reflected the kitchen back at me standing alone, eating pasta, trying to convince myself I wasn't afraid. The clock on the wall showed 3:47. I'd already noticed it when I'd come in earlier, but now I looked at it more carefully. It was a simple piece. White face, black numbers, the kind of clock you'd buy at a hardware store. Completely utilitarian, but it had stopped at the same moment as all the others. I washed my plate and went back to the front hall to get my bag, then climbed to the second floor. The lawyer had told me I could sleep in any of the bedrooms. I chose the largest one, at the front of the house, with windows overlooking Prospect Street. The bed was made up with sheets that smelled like lavender and something medicinal. Mothballs, maybe. There was a nightstand, a dresser, a rocking chair by the window, and 3 clocks, all stopped at 3:47. I checked my phone. 8:15 p.m., 59 hours and 45 minutes left. I could do this. It was just 2 more nights. I'd survived worse. Bad breakups, job losses, the long terrible months after my mother died. I could survive a quiet house with stopped clocks and creaky floors. I changed into my pajamas and got into bed with my laptop, planning to watch something mindless on Netflix until I fell asleep. The Wi-Fi password was written on a slip of paper the lawyer had given me. I connected and pulled up my email. 17 messages, mostly junk, a few work things that could wait until Monday, and 1 email with no subject line, sent from an address I didn't recognize. veeroldridge1952@gmail.com. I stared at it. My grandmother had been 91 when she died. She'd lived alone for decades. Would she have even had a Gmail account? I opened the email. "Claire, if you're reading this, you're in the house. You found the clocks. You found the one that's still ticking. I need you to understand something. March 14th, 1952 wasn't a tragedy. It was a choice. Your mother never forgave me for it. She left the day she turned 18 and never came back. She wouldn't let me see you, wouldn't let me explain. She thought I was insane. She wasn't wrong, but insanity and truth aren't always opposites. The clock in the attic is keeping something. I've been feeding it for 73 years. Now it's your turn. You have until Sunday at 3:47 p.m. 3 days, 72 hours. If the clock in the attic stops, everything I've kept waiting stops with it. I'm sorry I did this to you, but it was always going to be you. You were always part of this. The house knows. Vera." I read it 3 times. The email had been sent 6 months ago, 3 months before my grandmother had died. I checked the sent date again, checked the address, checked everything I could think of to prove this was fake, some kind of joke or scam, but the email was real, and the clock in the attic was ticking. I got out of bed and went back up to the 3rd floor. The attic door was open. I'd left it that way when I'd come down for dinner. I was sure of it. But now, standing on the landing, I couldn't remember. Had I closed it? Had I left it open? The clock was exactly where I'd left it, ticking quietly on its table. 6:47, 6:48, 6:49. No, that wasn't right. I pulled out my phone. 8:43 p.m. The clock showed 6:49 p.m. It was running slow, or the time on it was wrong, or I watched the second hand sweep around the face. It was moving at a normal pace, not slow at all, but the time it showed was nearly 2 hours behind my phone. I went back downstairs and checked every clock on the 2nd floor. All stopped at 3:47. 1st floor. Same thing. Only the one in the attic was moving, and it was moving wrong. I stood in the front hall, trying to make sense of it, trying to find the rational explanation that would let me dismiss my grandmother's email as the rambling of a dying woman's deteriorating mind. But I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd written. The clock in the attic is keeping something. If the clock in the attic stops, Everything I've kept waiting stops with it. I looked at the photograph of her on the wall. March 1952. She would have been 31, according to the dates in the photo albums I'd found. What had happened to her? What had happened on March 14th, 1952 at 3:47 p.m.? The house shifted around me. Not a settling sound this time. A genuine shift, like the walls had exhaled. And from somewhere above me, I heard the footsteps again. Clearer this time. More deliberate. Walking across the 3rd floor, toward the attic. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. The footsteps stopped when I reached the landing. The attic door was closed. I know I'd left it open. I was absolutely certain. I tried the handle. Locked. No, I said out loud. No, not again. I pulled out the ring of keys I'd left in my pocket and tried the one that had worked before. It didn't fit. I tried another. None of them fit. The lock had changed. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. Ticking. Just ticking. The clock. Keeping time. Keeping something. And underneath it, so faint I almost missed it. Breathing. Not my breathing. Someone else's. On the other side of the door. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I went back to the 2nd floor bedroom and got into bed and closed my eyes. But every sound in the house felt amplified. Every creak was a footstep. Every settling groan was a door opening. At 3:47 a.m., every stopped clock in the house chimed. All of them. Simultaneously. One clear, unified chime that rang through the walls and floors and made the windows hum in their frames. Then silence. I got up and walked through the house with my phone flashlight, checking each clock. They were all still stopped at 3:47. The chime hadn't restarted them. It had just marked the time. By dawn, I'd given up on sleep entirely. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table as gray light filtered through the windows, trying to make sense of the email, the locked attic, the breathing I'd heard. My grandmother had written, "You have until Sunday at 3:47 p.m. Today was Saturday. That gave me about 32 hours. But for what? I pulled up the email again and read it more carefully. The clock in the attic is keeping something. I've been feeding it for 73 years. Feeding it what? Time? The phrase didn't make sense. You couldn't feed a clock. You wound it, you maintained it, but you didn't feed it. Unless... I thought about the letters I'd found in the attic, the people thanking my grandmother for helping them with inherited houses, the brother who'd been required to stay in his family home for a week, the daughter found in an attic, curled up like she'd been sleeping, houses that remembered, houses that kept things. My mother's voice, from a memory so old I'd half forgotten it. Some silences protect you, Claire. Don't break them. What had she been protecting me from? I went to the parlor and stood in front of the fireplace, looking at the mantel clocks. Both stopped at 3:47, both perfectly preserved, their brass polished, their faces clean. Someone had been maintaining these clocks for 73 years. My grandmother, but she'd been maintaining them stopped. I ran my finger along the edge of one. No dust, not even a trace. The house had been empty since she died 6 months ago, but these clocks looked like they'd been cleaned yesterday. I walked from room to room, checking every clock, spotless, every other surface. Dust. Something was taking care of the clocks. Something in the house. I went back upstairs, driven by a need I couldn't name, and started searching the bedrooms more thoroughly. The first bedroom was sparse. A bed, a dresser, nothing personal. The second was the same. The third bedroom, at the back of the house, was different. This room had clearly been a child's room once. The wallpaper was faded yellow with white flowers. There was a small bed, a toy chest, a bookshelf filled with children's books from the 1950s, and on the wall, a photograph, a little girl, maybe 4 years old, standing in the front yard. Dark hair, serious expression, holding a stuffed rabbit. I'd seen this photograph before, in the album in the attic, one of the last photos before the empty pages. I looked closer at the frame. There was an inscription on the bottom. Margot Aldridge, 1951. Margot. My grandmother had had a daughter named Margot. My mother had never mentioned an aunt. I pulled out my phone and searched for Margot Aldridge, Litchfield, Connecticut. Nothing. I tried Margot Aldridge, 1951. Nothing. I tried Aldridge Family Litchfield. The first result was a historical society page about prominent Litchfield families. The Aldridges were mentioned briefly. Vera Aldridge, 1921-2024. resided at 47 Prospect Street from 1945 until her death. She was known locally for her work with estate management and her extensive collection of antique clocks. No mention of a daughter, no mention of a husband, no mention of anyone but Vera. I went back to the attic door, still locked. I pressed my palm against it and felt that same warmth, that same sense of attention. "Margot," I said quietly. The house held its breath. "Are you here? Is that who you are?" Nothing. I tried every key on the ring again. None of them fit. Then I remembered the box of letters. I'd dropped it when the door had rattled the night before. I went back into the attic. The door opened easily this time, like it had been waiting for me to remember, and found the letters scattered across the floor. I gathered them up and brought them downstairs to the kitchen table, where the morning light was stronger. There were 47 letters total, spanning from 1953 to 1998, all thanking my grandmother for helping with inherited houses, with properties that wouldn't let go, with spaces that remembered too much. One letter, dated 1967, stood out. "Vera, you asked me once why I keep doing this work when it costs so much. I've been thinking about your question. I think it's because houses aren't just walls and floors. They're vessels. They hold what we put into them. Love, grief, rage, regret. Most of the time, that's fine. The emotions disperse, fade, get painted over. But sometimes they concentrate. Sometimes they crystallize into something that won't let go. You understand this better than anyone I've ever met. You've been living with it longer than any of us. When you're ready to stop, when the weight becomes too much, you know where to find me. Samuel. No last name. No return address." I kept reading. Another letter. 1973. Mrs. Aldridge. My grandfather's will required me to wind all the clocks in his house every day for a year. I thought he was mad. Then I met you, and you explained what he'd been keeping. I've been winding them for 6 months now. Sometimes I hear her singing in the kitchen. My grandmother, who died 20 years ago. She sounds happy. Is that possible? Can the Kep be happy? David Monroe. I sat back, trying to piece it together. My grandmother had been helping people understand houses that kept things, emotions, memories, maybe even people, and she'd been keeping something herself for 73 years, since March 14th, 1952, the day all the clocks stopped, except one. I thought about the email again. If the clock in the attic stops, everything I've kept waiting stops with it. Margot. She'd been keeping Margot. A 4-year-old girl who disappeared from the photograph albums after 1951, who had no obituary, no record, no existence beyond a few pictures in a child's bedroom that had been preserved for 70 years. My phone buzzed. "Jessica. Claire, seriously, call me. I'm getting worried." I dialed her number. "Finally," she answered. "Are you okay? You sound weird in your texts." "I'm fine," I said. Jess, did my mom ever mention anything about her family? About having a sister or any siblings?" "Not that I remember." "Why?" "I found pictures. A little girl. I think my grandmother had a daughter who died." "Jesus. Do you want me to come up there? You shouldn't be alone dealing with this. If you're still listening, you're already part of this house." "No," I said. "No, I'm okay. I just have 24 more hours and then I can leave." "You sure?" "I'm sure." We talked for a few more minutes about nothing. Her job, her boyfriend, the weather, normal things. But when I hung up, the silence of the house rushed back in like water filling a vacuum. I went upstairs to the attic door. It was open. The clock on the table showed 7:23 a.m. My phone showed 9:47 a.m. The clock was running more than 2 hours slow now. No, not slow. Behind. It was running behind, losing time, like something was pulling against it. I walked to the table and stood in front of it, watching the second hand move. Tick, tick, tick. Time kept is time owed. What did you owe, grandmother? What did you promise? The breathing started again, behind me this time. I turned slowly. The child's bedroom door across the hall was open. I could see the yellow wallpaper, the small bed, the toy chest. And sitting on the bed, very small and very still, a little girl, dark hair, serious expression, holding a stuffed rabbit. She looked at me with eyes that had been waiting 73 years. "You came," she said. I couldn't move. The little girl sat on the edge of the bed, her feet not quite touching the floor, watching me with an expression that was far too calm for a child who shouldn't exist. "Grandmother said you would," she continued. Her voice was soft, precise, like she was reciting something she'd memorized. She said someone would come when she couldn't wind the clocks anymore. Margot. My voice barely worked. She nodded. Do you know how to wind them? The clock in the attic? It's very important that it keeps running. I forced myself to breathe. Hallucination, I thought. Stress, lack of sleep, suggestion. I was seeing what I expected to see after finding the photographs. The letters, the child's room. You're not real, I said. She tilted her head. Grandmother said people would say that. She said it doesn't matter if I'm real, only if I'm kept. Kept, like the letters said, like my grandmother had been doing for 73 years. I took a step toward the bedroom. Margot didn't move, didn't react. She just sat there, holding her rabbit, waiting. What happened to you? I asked. I went into the clock, she said simply. March 14th, 1952. I was playing in the attic and I found it, and I went inside. Inside the clock. It's bigger in there. Grandmother says time is like a house. It has rooms. You just have to know how to open the doors. My hands were shaking. I gripped the door frame to steady myself. Where's your mother? Where's Vera? She's in the clocks too. All the stopped ones. She went in to find me, but she couldn't bring me back. So she stayed. She's been staying for 73 years, keeping the door open. The stopped clocks. All frozen at 3:47. The moment my grandmother had gone in after her daughter. She's in there. In all of them. In the time between, Margot said. That's what she calls it. The space where the seconds stop. She's been holding it open so I wouldn't be alone. I thought about the chime at 3:47 a.m. All the clocks ringing at once. My grandmother, marking time from inside the stopped seconds, still maintaining her vigil. Why didn't she just bring you back? I asked. Why stay in there? Margot's expression flickered. The first real emotion I'd seen. Something that might have been sadness, or might have been understanding, or might have been both, because I didn't want to come back, she said quietly. I liked it in there. It was quiet and safe and nothing hurt. When grandmother came for me, I asked her to stay instead. You were 4 years old. I was scared, Margot said. Father had just died. Mother was crying all the time. The house was so sad. And then I found the clock and opened it and everything stopped hurting. She looked down at the rabbit in her arms. Grandmother said she understood. She said she'd stay with me until I was ready to leave, but I'm still not ready. I don't think I'll ever be ready. My chest hurt. I thought about my mother, growing up in this house with a sister who'd vanished and a mother who'd vanished trying to find her. No wonder she'd left at 18. No wonder she'd never come back. No wonder she'd forbidden me from ever meeting my grandmother. She'd known. Not the details, maybe, but the weight of it, the cost. What happens if the clock stops? I asked. The door closes, Margot said, and the space collapses. Everything that's been kept stops being kept. You'd die. I'm already dead, she said matter-of-factly. I died in 1952, I think. Or I never died because I went into the clock before dying could reach me. Grandmother says it's complicated. I slid down the door frame until I was sitting on the floor, my back against the wall. Why me? I asked. Why did she leave this to me? Because you're part of the line, Margot said. Grandmother, mother, you. The house knows. It's been waiting for you. My mother escaped. Did she? Margot's eyes were very dark, very old. She never came back. But did she escape? I thought about my mother's fear of old houses, her sensitivity to sounds, the way she'd gotten pale when I'd asked about her family, the way she'd told me some silences protect you. She'd been protecting me from this, from the choice. What do I have to do? I asked. Wind the clock, Margot said. Every day. Keep it running. Keep the door open. For how long? Until someone else comes. Grandmother did it for 73 years. Your mother was supposed to do it, but she refused. Now it's you. I looked at this child who'd been 4 years old for 73 years, preserved in the space between seconds, kept safe, and kept prisoner by a mother who'd loved her too much to let her go. What if I don't? I asked. What if I just leave? Margot was quiet for a long time. Then the clock stops, she said finally. The door closes. Grandmother and I stop being kept. Maybe that would be better. Grandmother is tired. I can feel it sometimes. How tired she is. How much it hurts to hold the space open. But you don't want to stop. I'm scared, Margot said. I've been scared for 73 years, and Grandmother has been holding me through it. If she lets go, she didn't finish. I understood. If my grandmother let go, Margot would have to face whatever she'd been running from in 1952. Death, grief, loneliness, whatever 4-year-olds fear when the world becomes too much. And my grandmother couldn't bear to let that happen. So she'd stayed, for 73 years, in the space between seconds, holding her daughter. I got to my feet slowly. "Show me how to wind it," I said. Margot's face brightened. The first truly childlike expression I'd seen. "You'll do it. You'll keep us." I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. I just followed her up to the attic. The clock was still ticking, still running behind. Margot walked to it like she'd done it 1,000 times, like this was a familiar ritual. "The key is in the base," she said, pointing. "You have to wind it every 24 hours. Grandmother did it at 3:47, always to mark the time. I found the key, a small brass thing that fit into a hole in the bottom of the clock. Turn it 16 times, Margot instructed. Not more, not less. 16 is the number that keeps the door open. I inserted the key and turned. 1, 2, 3. I could feel resistance in the mechanism, like I was winding against something. 8, 9, 10. The clock's ticking grew louder. 14, 15, 16. The key stopped turning. The mechanism locked. The clock's hands jumped forward. 9:47 a.m., the correct time. "There," Margot said, smiling. "Now it's wound. Now we're kept." I looked at her standing in the dusty attic light, still holding her rabbit, still 4 years old, still waiting. "For how long?" I asked. Her smile faded. "Until you're too tired to keep doing it," she said. "That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." I thought about my grandmother. 73 years. I thought about my mother, who'd run from this choice and spent her whole life running. I thought about myself, standing in an attic with a dead child and a ticking clock and a decision that would define everything that came after. "I need to think," I said. Margot nodded. "You have until tomorrow, 3:47 p.m. That's when you have to wind it again." She walked past me, out of the attic, down the stairs. I didn't follow. I sat on the floor next to the clock and listened to it tick. I spent that day trying to find another answer. I called the Historical Society. They confirmed that Vera Aldridge had lived at 47 Prospect Street for 79 years, that she'd been known for her work with estate management, that she'd never remarried after her husband died in 1951. No mention of a daughter. I searched death records, birth records, census data, nothing. Margot Aldridge had never officially existed beyond 1951. At 3:47 p.m., all the stopped clocks in the house chimed again. I was in the library when it happened. The sound resonated through the walls like the house was breathing, marking time, refusing to let me forget. I climbed to the attic. The clock on the table showed 3:47 p.m. exactly, the correct time, still ticking. I checked my phone. 3:47 p.m. The clock had caught up. I sat down at the table and put my head in my hands. This was insane. I was sitting in an attic, believing I was keeping a dead child alive by winding a clock. This was grief or stress or some kind of break with reality. But I'd heard Margot's voice, seen her face, felt the resistance in the clock's mechanism. I'd stood in this house for 2 days and felt it watching, waiting, remembering. "The house knows," my grandmother had written, and I did too. I knew what my mother had known when she'd fled at 18. I knew what my grandmother had known when she'd made her choice in 1952. Some things can't be let go. Some people keep holding on even when it destroys them. My phone rang. Jessica. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. "Claire, seriously, pick up." I answered. "Hey, you sound terrible. What's wrong?" "I found out why my mother never talked about her family," I said. "My grandmother lost a daughter. She spent her whole life trying to keep her." Jessica was quiet for a moment. "Lost how? It doesn't matter. She couldn't let go. That's heartbreaking." "Yeah. Are you okay?" I looked at the clock. Still ticking. Still keeping. "I don't know yet," I said. We talked for a while longer. Normal conversation. Normal concerns. When we hung up, I felt the weight of the house settle back around me. I went down to the child's bedroom. Margot was sitting on the bed, exactly as before. "Do you ever leave this room?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said. "I walk through the house. I look out the windows. But I always come back here. This is where I belong. Don't you want to see outside? Don't you want to grow up?" "I did grow up," Margot said. "Just differently." I grew into the house instead of away from it. Grandmother says I'm part of the walls now, part of the stopped time. I sat down on the floor across from her. If I wind the clock tomorrow and keep winding it, what happens to me? You'll live here, Margot said. You'll take care of the house. You'll help other people who inherit houses that won't let go, like grandmother did. For how long? Until someone comes after you, or until you decide to stop. And if I stop, if I just walk away. Margot looked at her rabbit, running her fingers over its worn fabric. Then grandmother and I stop being kept. The house will be empty for real. All the clocks will stay stopped forever. Would that be so bad? She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw tears in her eyes. I don't know, she said. I've been here so long I don't remember what it's like to not be here. I'm scared to find out. I thought about fear, about being 4 years old and afraid and finding a door that led away from the hurt. I thought about being 31 and losing your daughter and choosing to follow her into that door rather than let her go. I thought about being 18 and seeing what that choice had cost and running as far as you could. And I thought about being 29 and inheriting all of it. The choice, the cost, the keeping. Can I talk to her? I asked. To my grandmother? Margot tilted her head, considering. At 3:47, she said. When all the clocks chime, that's when she's closest. That's when the stopped time and the moving time touch. I waited in the library, watching the clock on the wall. 3:46 p.m. My heart was racing. 3:47 p.m. The clocks chimed. And in that moment, in the resonance of all those frozen bells ringing at once, I heard her. Not a voice exactly, more like a presence, a knowledge, a weight in the air. Claire, I'm here. I'm sorry. I know. I couldn't let her go. I tried. I went in to bring her back, and she asked me to stay, and I couldn't say no. I've been holding her for 73 years, and I'm so tired. Why me? Why not just let it end? Because she's still afraid. Because I promised to keep her safe. Because someone has to decide when the keeping stops. And if I say no, then it stops. We stop. The door closes. Maybe that's mercy. I don't know anymore. I'm too tired to know. I close my eyes. What would you do? I asked. If you had the choice again. The same thing. I'd always do the same thing. She's my daughter. The chiming faded. The presence withdrew. I sat in the silence, alone except for the ticking of the clock upstairs. That night, I barely slept. I walked through the house room by room, looking at the stopped clocks, the preserved furniture, the life my grandmother had built around her choice. At dawn, I made my decision. I went to the attic at 3 p.m. The clock showed 2:47 p.m., still running an hour behind, losing time. I sat at the table and waited. At 3:47 p.m., all the clocks chimed. I picked up the winding key. 16 turns. That's all it would take. 16 turns to keep them, to stay, to become the keeper. I thought about my grandmother, winding this clock every day for 73 years, marking time, keeping time, owing time. I thought about my mother, who'd run from this house and never looked back. I thought about Margot, still 4 years old, still scared, still held. I put the key in the mechanism. I turned it once, twice, 3 times. The resistance was stronger today, like the door was harder to hold open, like the kept were slipping. 10 turns. 11. Margot appeared in the doorway, watching. 12 more hours, she said quietly. After this, you'll have 12 more hours before you have to wind it again. 15 turns. My hand was shaking. 16. The clock jumped forward. 3:47 p.m. The mechanism locked. I looked at Margot. I didn't do it because I wanted to keep you, I said. I did it because I need to understand. Understand what? Why she couldn't let go. Why my mother ran. Why the house chose me. I stood up, facing her. I'm winding the clock, but not forever. I'm giving you and my grandmother 1 year. 12 months. That's how long I'll keep the door open. Margot's eyes went wide. And then we see if you can walk through on your own. If you can face what you were running from. If she can finally let you go. What if we can't? Then I let the clock stop, I said, and the door closes. And you both find out what comes after being kept. Margot was quiet for a long moment. Grandmother won't like it. I know. She'll try to convince you to stay longer. I know that too. The little girl who'd been 4 years old for 73 years looked at me with something that might have been hope or might have been terror. Okay, she said finally. 1 year. I walked down the stairs, out of the house, into the October afternoon. The house watched me get into my car. I didn't turn around. I would come back tomorrow, and the day after that, for 1 year, not because the house demanded it, but because the kept deserved a choice, even if that choice was learning to let go. The clock stopped for everyone on March 14th, 1952, but they'd been waiting 73 years for someone who could tell them how to start again. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing stories about houses that hide what no one wanted to face.